Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming along. Just a little bit of, or a few words before we get into our actual update that we're planning to present today. Just a few words to put some perspective, perhaps, on the size of this problem with the EC225. There are a number of aircraft all over the world. My company, particularly, we're a global operator. CHC are a global operator. This is affecting us everywhere. This isn't just Aberdeen. We have EC225s not flying offshore in countries all over the world. I mean, the entire offshore fleet is pretty much on the ground. So it's just to make sure that everybody realises it's not just an Aberdeen issue. This is a global issue that's affecting a number of companies. And it's affecting companies that aren't even based in the UK or even in Europe. So it's just to put a little bit more of a global view on the whole thing. I think I'll probably start us off then with a quick update on the status. I'm going to run through the communications guidance that we're putting together. That's really the primary function of the Helicopter Safety Steering Group, is communicating with the workforce offshore. So we've got some additional work that's going to be coming along that's going to give some more information on technical issues with helicopters. An update on our visit last week to Eurocopter. And then some words about the shaft failure and where we are and the path, potential path back to flying. This is something that we've put together at the request of everybody here, which is increasing the amount of communication and information that goes out regarding helicopter technical issues. One of those, the big issue really, is RTBs, this return to base. Now, they're very common. There are very good reasons for them, and 99.9% of them are very, very minor events. But it's to really give everybody that reassurance that they're minor events and explain what they're all about. So really, it's about sharing information on these events when they happen. So rather than reading about it in the P&J or the Evening Express, there's a clear route from the operator, helicopter operator concerned as to what happened. And it's just the first step in a process of getting more information in a timely manner out to the travelling workforce. So it's very basic. Just tell you the helicopter operator, the date and time of the event, the aircraft type, the location, which will actually be the operating base of the aircraft rather than where the event actually happened, and a quick summary. I mean, the reason behind, as I say, 99.9% of RTBs is a minor technical issue. Now, all the aircraft have primary systems and backup systems and standby systems for pretty much everything on board. And as a requirement for a commercial air transport flight, pretty much all of these systems have to be serviceable for an aircraft to take off with passengers. So what can happen is that you en route from Aberdeen to an offshore location, and you get an indication that one of these secondary or standby systems has failed. Now, the impact on the actual flight that you're on is zero, but we have guidance in the aircraft, which is a legal document known as a minimum equipment list, which outlines what we're allowed to fly with, what has to be serviceable for the aircraft to depart on a commercial flight. It's quite a big document, and if the item that's failed is on the list that is required for flight, then we have no choice but to turn back unless we can very easily repair it ourselves, which, as two pilots on the aircraft, generally you can't. So that could mean that it could be something simple like a fuel transfer pump for transferring fuel between two particular fuel tanks on the aircraft. No impact on safety, but it's required to be serviceable. There's a whole range, there's hundreds and hundreds of items that fall into this category. So what that means is if you land offshore an oil rig, you now cannot take off on a commercial air transport flight until that item is serviceable. And that would potentially mean flying engineers out, winching them down, winching out spare parts, carrying out intricate maintenance on an exposed helideck offshore, which isn't something that we particularly want to do when you can just turn around, fly back to Aberdeen and get the whole thing sorted out in a hangar with all the facilities and everything you need to get the problem rectified. That's generally what an RTB is all about. So this is what we're going to be communicating. And you'll see they're relatively common. My company, we probably get 2 or 3 every single day across the UK with our bases, in Aberdeen, Southern North Sea, Shetland, everywhere. We've got to get 2 or 3 every day. It's just a fact of life that there are minor technical issues with the aircraft, and we'd much rather repair them in the hangar than try and do it offshore. It's much quicker as well. So that's really what this is all about, and it's to put the information out there so people see that these are sort of routine events. Well, I'll hand over to Alan now to quickly run through our visit to Eurocopter last week. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Tim. Good morning, everyone. Alan Chesterman from Apache. Just picking up on the communication piece there, I think I just want to acknowledge the helicopter operators that this may not look like a big step. It is a big step. We've got all the helicopter operators to agree to do those communications and get those RTBs out. So I think it's an important step. And what we'll be doing in the HSSG is monitoring how well that communication process is going and aiming to add to that and put more information out there based on the learning that we get from the communication with the RTBs. Right, this next piece, I'm going to talk about the visit to the Eurocopter factory in Marseille last week at Marignane in Marseille. I'm not going to say too much about it because there's a couple of guys from a couple of safety reps who were on the trip who are going to talk about it later on this morning. But I just want to give you a bit of a perspective on it because I think it was important in terms of the communication and understanding by the HSSG of what's actually going on to get to the bottom of the shaft failures and the EM loop failure on the EC225. So we were invited, my thanks to Derek and the guys sitting around the table here for what I thought was a great trip. The primary purpose of the visit, there were some other things as well. There was some great networking and so on, but it was really to communicate the investigation and the work being done that has been done on the EC225 ditching incidents. And there were attendees there from HSSG. It was myself and Tim were there. There were 3 or 4 safety reps there that are involved in the step change leadership team. There were aviation experts. There were company guys. There were a couple of guys there from Talisman. Eurocopter put their top management on. And we had access all day to the likes of Derek Sharples here, Gilles, Michael, the chief engineer in Eurocopter, Serge Mackey, and also the chief technical officer, Jean-Brice Dumont. So, a huge commitment there to showing us what was happening. And we went around the factory with these guys all day. They put on an excellent show. So I've just got a few pictures here and some reflections on the visit. So first of all, what came through, and again the reps, I'm sure we'll talk about this later on, is the commitment from the top in Eurocopter to get to the bottom of this incident and prevent recurrence. And I certainly felt, I can't speak for the other people, but I certainly felt there was a genuine care about safety. That comes through. You can't hide that. Whether people are genuine about it or not. The size of the commitment is extraordinary. There are something like 100 people working on this investigation full time. It's a massive operation. The Marignane site is absolutely huge. There's 20,000 people working there, but there are 100 people just on this investigation. And they've got their top guys working it. The investigation's being led by the chief engineer. He's pulled out some of the key best people to lead different streams of the investigation. And just acknowledging what happened with the first, after the first ditching in May, the cause was thought to be this batch of bad shafts, and sort of fairly rapidly landed on that cause, and it proved to be misleading. And what I can say now from what I've seen is that they're looking at absolutely every possible cause. So these were some of the themes. I don't know if I got them all 100% right, if that's exactly how they've set them up. But there's bench testing of the gearboxes. They're looking at materials. They're looking at the dynamics, how the whole thing operates dynamically. They're looking at monitoring. They're looking at the MLib system. And all of these streams have all got a leader and a team around them, and they have this war room. It's not quite as big as it's about half, maybe a third of the size of this, and I'll show you some pictures on the next slide of the war room where they track all of the activities to go down each branch of the investigation. So it really is exhaustive. You can see up there, I won't go through all of it just now, but on the top left is the gearbox testing. So there are a couple of these gearbox test bays. Now I think it's 4,000 horsepower going through this gearbox. So what you've got is, well, it's not hooked up at the moment, but the gearbox is the yellow and the red piece there, and then the power's coming in from two electric motors, and it's taken out through the shaft at the top. And in the inside of the gearbox, in the part that got the crack, there are these. That's that sort of little picture there. That there are these strain gauges installed in the area of the weld, where the two failures have occurred, and there are lots of these things all the way around the weld. And in order so they run the thing up to full power, and to actually get all the information out from these strain gauges, Eurocopter had to develop a device to actually transmit the information because the thing's spinning, and so and that whole piece has its own project managers just to make that project happen. So I'm just trying to give you a sense of how much effort is actually involved in doing that. One of the pieces there, I think the lads are going to talk about it later on there, but on the bench there you've got the gear shaft. By the way, this chap, this is Serge, the chief engineer, and I think some of the guys thought that because the shaft was welded, the lower piece, so this is the lower piece that takes the power down to the lube oil pumps, and that is welded onto the bevel gear. I think some of the lads thought that it was actually somebody was going around with a welding rod. It doesn't happen exactly like that. And so we were looking at how that shaft is actually made. We actually saw one of them being welded, and this is the view you get. It's an electron beam welder, and this is a picture of the welding actually happening at the time. And I've got a couple. I had to get my mug shot in there, of course. Top left and bottom right there, you've got a picture of the war room. So you can see here, up on the screen behind they use the screen there to communicate during meetings. And then you've got, around the room, you've got various work streams doing these various root cause, possible cause investigations. Here was this is one of the shafts. This is one where the Eurocopter have deliberately cracked a shaft and made the crack go all the way around, and then they're looking at inspecting the crack surface to see how the crack actually propagates through the thing. And then we've got a picture of the gearbox. So some of us, that was the first time we'd actually seen how the whole thing works together. So the war room's very, very impressive, and an awful lot of work going on there and being managed there. Okay, so excuse me, Eurocopter are going to talk about this some more, but I just want to give you a brief synopsis of where we are to get into the next conversation about, where do we go from here. So just to recap, there were two similar failures in May and October. The emergency lubrication systems in both accidents falsely indicated that the MLUB didn't work, and flying over the North Sea is suspended by the CAA and operators. And the status is that the investigation is still ongoing. The causes of the shaft failure has not yet been determined, and the cause of the false alarms has been determined. Flying remains suspended, as everyone knows. So the way forward, and I really want to put something into the room here. I'm talking a minute about the press article that appeared in the P&J. I think it was, what day is it, Thursday, on Tuesday. So the root cause is still uncertain, and the Eurocopter guys are going to talk about that in a moment. There are various hypotheses, and Eurocopter have not been able to replicate those as yet. There's a huge amount of information and knowledge been gathered through this investigation process. So I'm just going to reflect a little here, and the Eurocopter guys will put me right later if I'm off beam. But I think that, you know, having gone down the incorrect path after the first failure in May, all possible causes have now been opened up, and a huge amount of knowledge through that 100 people working this has been gathered on this whole system. So it's a much better informed place today than it was, you know, maybe 6 months ago. Now, ideally, the root cause will be replicated, but we have to acknowledge the possibility that it might not be. And that brings forward the possibility of alternative solutions. And this is where I wanted to acknowledge the press article that was that Tim's boss's boss was quoted in the P&J on Tuesday, and he was talking about the likelihood that his opinion was that the aircraft would be flying again within, perhaps by the summer. And, you know, kind of how will that happen? And I just want to go into what the HSSG's position is on that, because that's important. So we are closely monitoring the progress of the investigation, and the present stance is no return to flying until the root cause is identified. Now, any return to flying, let's just be absolutely clear about this, the first thing that needs to happen is that the relevant authorities have to say it's okay, and they need to be convinced that it's safe. The main one in the UK is the Civil Aviation Authority. So they would have to be satisfied that any interim type of solution is safe. Now, so that's the first step, and then the HSSG will have to discuss and make a collective judgment as to whether or not the aircraft should return to offshore flying in the UK. We're not at the place of doing that yet. You know, but the decision that we make will be guided by the best technical expertise that's available, the regulators, and so on. So, and everybody needs to be convinced, all the stakeholders, and I'm including everybody in this room, all the pilots, all the people who fly on the helicopters, the HSSG, we all need to be convinced that it's safe to return to flying. And I just want to say that open communication is key. You know, that's why I'm talking about this now. You know, there are people working on what would happen if the root cause can't be definitively identified. There are people working on it right now. There's a lot of effort going into it. I think it's better to get that into the room and let everybody know that, so we can all be informed about it and take it from there. So that's all I have to say on this matter. I'm sure that's going to provoke lots of thoughts and questions. Tim?
One thing perhaps just to put, again, some perspective on that. Although it was my boss that made those comments, those were a personal opinion. There is absolutely no pressure on either me or my company to go flying before these aircraft are safe. There's no commercial pressure. We're not getting pressure from our clients. There's no financial pressure. The actual storage costs for the aircraft right now are actually being covered by our clients. Your employers are paying for everything. So there's no actual pressure on us as an helicopter operating company to put these aircraft in the air before we're happy they're safe and you're happy they're safe. So just to make sure that point is out there and it's clear. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just to finish on that, we discussed that there was a step change leadership team meeting yesterday, and I put this information into the room, and there are some people in the room who weren't are uncomfortable about the fact that, you know, about return to flying without getting to the root cause. So this is going to take some time. We need to work through it properly and discuss the issues out in the open and all be convinced that it is the right thing to do. If it comes to that, I mean, let's hope that the investigation will come up with a definitive conclusion.